Joel, a lot of people, when they hear where you work, they think about football and philanthropy, the Tim Tebow Foundation.
Yep.
But there's a lot more to what you do there. Before we talk about the foundation and its work, let's talk about you and your journey, both to this country and into the faith. What can you tell me about the beginnings of Joel Chakra?
So I was actually born in India, and I was raised in the Middle East for the first 6 years of my life, actually. And so my dad decided that he wanted a better life for my brother and I, and my mom agreed as well. And we immigrated to Silver Spring, Maryland when I was 6 years old, and that's where I grew up. So went halfway across the world and met cousins I never knew and aunts and uncles that I never knew, because in India everybody's an aunt and uncle or cousin. And so spent most of my life growing up in Silver Spring, Maryland, and really learning a lot about American culture and American life, and meeting new friends and family, and really bonding with cousins that were like my brothers and sisters growing up. And a lot of those early lessons have given me deep convictions about my faith and understanding where I come from and understanding the dignity of work. So these things have really been ingrained in what I do on a daily basis. And just thinking about, one of the things that people have always said to me, because I've spent most of my career building technology companies and early startups, and one of the pieces of feedback or comments that I would always get is like, isn't that risky? It seems really risky. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
And I think back and I think, my parents moved halfway across the world with 2 kids. I think that's risky.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So what I do is actually a lot easier than that scale of difficulty. And so, that's kind of the early childhood and kind of where I came from.
And one doesn't just overnight become a tech entrepreneur and investor. What did your parents do, and did you end up doing what your parents studied in order to go into this, or did they come and study something different and you chose a different path?
No, not at all. It was completely different. My parents, when they first moved here, my mom was figuring out how she could actually be certified as a nurse in this country. And one of the earliest memories that I have of my dad is that he used to deliver pizzas for Pizza Hut. Right? It's kind of like figuring out the American dream, right?
Yes.
You got to do what it takes. You got to kind of work your way up, figure out what it is that you can do first, because that's the most important thing. And especially with the degree of difficulty of having 2 young kids, my brother and I, and making sure that we're provided for and doing the basics. And so when I grew up, I actually didn't even know what entrepreneurship was, right? My assumption of work was, hey, you like show up at this big office building, you start off at the first floor, and you try to work your way up to the tallest floor, right? Like, that was what I thought it would be. And it wasn't really until college that I actually understood or knew that you could build companies, right? I think, my parents were humble. They always did the best that they could, and they didn't actually push me in any certain direction, which I think was really interesting for me. I didn't feel misguided as a result of it. I felt a lot of freedom, actually. And so I wasn't pushed in a certain way, and once I understood that like entrepreneurship is a path, I took that leap. Now, that didn't happen overnight either. I had some really great mentors and people that showed me how to do it. I think that was really important for me. One thing that I think is a misconception is most people think entrepreneurship is a gift that you either have or you don't have, right? They take a look at Elon Musk and they see the top 1% of the top 1% and how they operate. Elon Musk is different. He's just a gifted person. That's not the standard for entrepreneurship. Because of my own journey, I deeply believe that entrepreneurship can be taught. I think we should do a better job of teaching young kids of how to take the first steps of entrepreneurship. What does it look like? I think we should teach that better in high school and college. And so my path is more of a mentored path and a learning path, and not having the it factor right away. I didn't go to the best colleges or the right schools, didn't come from the right pedigree. So all of it is really, the basic answer is the grace of God.
Amen.
Being a part of every single step. But just this idea of, what can be attainable is out there, and how do we make that at the most basic level so more people can step into their true calling that God has given them.
You were obviously always very well aware of family surrounding you. Were you always motivated by faith in relationship with Christ, or did that change at some moment?
Yeah, I think growing up, I had a very strong Christian upbringing. You know, what's interesting about my family is my family has been Christian since my great-great-grandfather, which, if you know a lot about Indian history, for the part of that I grew up in, that's actually pretty rare. Obviously, Thomas went to southern India, and a lot of the church was early established there, but my family wasn't a part of that because we're kind of from the middle north area. And so Christianity was deeply convicted in my family growing up. We read the Bible every single day. We prayed every single day. And I think for me, I had a little bit of a rebellious spirit. That's probably where some of the entrepreneurship genes kind of come in.
Be your own boss.
Yeah, and so I had just decided that it wasn't, my faith wasn't for me. It was something that was my parents, but it wasn't really for me. And it led to some, you know, really hard times, and this recognition of you can't actually do it on your own. I think most of humanity tries to strive to prove themselves to be right. And that was a spirit that I had, was like, I can do this. And really, I didn't get to know the Lord until I was almost 28 years old. And what ended up happening with me was I moved to Columbus, Ohio in order to build more companies, and thought that's what I was going there for. And coincidentally, there was a guy that I knew from college that lived there. And he asked me to go to church with him. And I said, why not? I've kind of done that my whole life. Sure, I'll go. And what I experienced there was unlike anything that I'd ever experienced before. And it was people my age that were truly following the Lord and truly loved people. And they knew the sin that I was living in, but they continued to invite me back. They continued to want to have fellowship with me. And my attitude was, you don't want to be seen with me. Like, I think you're amazing. I shouldn't be associated with you. But what do the scriptures say? It is God's kindness that leads us to repentance. And what those people did was showed me the kindness of God. And so that's when I came to faith. And those same questions about work came up again because of my faith. I started to examine all parts of my life, right? I went from a life that didn't really want to get married to then finding my wife. Didn't really know if I wanted kids to now I have 3 kids. And so I think, again, these are just the gifts that God reveals to you and just promises throughout Scripture. And then the experience of that is so powerful, especially coming to know Him and just changing your life because of it. And then my work changed as a result of my faith as well. What ended up happening was I started asking, again, a lot of these questions about my faith, which was, shouldn't I just be sold out to my faith now? Doesn't it require me to be a missionary? Doesn't it require me to maybe work in the church?
And leave everything behind?
Leave everything behind.
All your money,
yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. And by the way, some of that is very real for some people, and that's very noble, and that's awesome. But it wasn't actually until 2020, after asking a lot of these questions for really about 6 or 7 years, that some of those things really started to get crystallized for me. And one of the things that happened to me is I read this book. Some people may know it. It's called Faith-Driven Entrepreneur. And I read this book by Henry Kaestner. And I remember reading it thinking, this guy thinks the same things that I think. Who are these people? And this is when I was what you would call in like a Silicon Valley style bubble. And I didn't know that there was faith-driven entrepreneurs out there. I didn't know that there was faith-driven investors out there. I didn't know the movement that God was having with people of faith through the marketplace. And reading this book really deeply convicted me at a time where I needed conviction, alongside the scriptures, of course. But just seeing an example of it really called me out to say, hey, you know what? Those things that God has put on your heart, you can actually walk freely in those now. Like, there's other people doing it. Stop trying to do it on your own.
Yeah.
One, you'll always need my help. That's what God revealed to me. And then number 2 is, my people are already doing this. Instead of trying to do it on your own, why don't you go join the people that are already a part of this movement in the body of Christ, right? Like, you don't have to do it alone. There's this movement that exists that you can flow into. And so that's the path that my life took about 6 years ago.
That's incredible. And so that's how you got into the idea of venture capitalism, et cetera, that makes the choice of only backing faith-based leaders.
Yes.
But it also led you on a path to work with the Tebow Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of famous things that that foundation does. One, very notably, is the Night to Shine, the work with those who are disabled. Tell us a little bit about that.
Night to Shine is probably one of the most incredible experiences you'll ever have in your life. I would challenge everybody to go find a local church and go attend one Night to Shine. It will be the best night of your life. And so there's this grounding principle that we have, which is everyone is made in the image of God. And if that is true, then how do we treat those that have often been forgotten? And so Night to Shine, I believe, is one of the purest examples of that. And what we do is we know that there are kids, boys and girls around the world with special needs. And they're often not celebrated or loved or looked favorably upon. Now, the United States does a better job than most countries around the world. However, there's a lot of places around the world where they're viewed as cursed, forgotten, and thrown away.
They're eliminated in some countries.
That's right. And what we decided to do very specifically is to say, you know what? If no one else will celebrate them, we will. And so Night to Shine has outgrown anything that I've ever seen. And it's actually created some unique experiences for the gospel that I'll share as well. So Night to Shine is a prom that we throw for boys and girls with special needs. And this past February, we were at a little over 900 churches, all 50 states, and I believe about 80 countries around the world.
Wow.
And what we do very specifically is we crown them as kings and queens at the prom. And so this past year, we were able to serve almost 125,000 kings and queens that were crowned. And the reason why is we believe that they are made in the image of God, so therefore they are God's royalty, and they should be treated as such. And it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry. In my case, my first Night to Shine, it made my feet hurt because I bought a brand new pair of dress shoes for that event. And the girl that we were with danced for 3 hours straight.
Yeah, let's go.
And so don't make that mistake again. But it is literally one of the most beautiful nights of the year. And actually, there's some tough countries that we do that in. And there's been examples of countries that we've done that in. And because there's people that have come through those churches that have said, this is the first time that somebody has treated my daughter or my son with dignity. Why is that?
Yeah.
And we get to share why. And it's because the love of Jesus and because we know that they are made in the image of God.
Yeah, absolutely. That to me is one of the most beautiful examples of fighting for human dignity. Another way that you do that is by fighting human trafficking. How did that start? And what's kind of the update on where you are with that fight?
Yeah, so this is a fight that's deeply missional to Tim and everyone at the foundation and to so many of our partners and ministry partners around the world, and also all the donors that give. We know that it's going to take all of us and even more. I think human trafficking, most people may associate it with movies like Taken or even Sound of Freedom. And while Taken is probably a really bad example, that's made for Hollywood, Sound of Freedom is a good example. It's not the whole truth. And so when we think about human trafficking, we think about everything across the spectrum, including labor trafficking, right?
Which is why we see those signs at so many airports of like, are you here on your own? Do you have plans? Are you holding your own documents?
Yeah, and oftentimes trafficking is done by those that are closest to them. You know, we've been a part of some really harrowing stuff that's done by a lot of our ministry partners around the world. And what most people don't know, that it's either a mother or a father that's in a tough economic situation that has trafficked their child, or just really evil stuff that happens. You know, there's also the layer of exploitation that's on top of trafficking. And so if you look at the numbers across the world, they're staggering. You know, I don't think most people realize how big the problems are, but this is, you know, the United States is probably the largest funder of it around the world. And so we've got a problem in our own backyard, which then affects countries around the world. And so when we think about trafficking, when we think about exploitation, these are also underfunded opportunities. Because most people may not think that it's happening in their backyard, it's either ignored because we think it's an overseas problem or it's a over there problem. No, it's here. It's just disguised, right? Or people will think, exploitation looks like, oh, it's the overweight guy in his basement with Cheetos all over his shirt, looking at stuff on the internet. No, that's not true, right? It's oftentimes middle class, some of the best positions. And what they've done is they've created the perfect persona for themselves, right? They're hiding under the perfect persona so that they can't be recognized. And so what we've tried to do is try to leverage everything for the fight, is what we say. That's for profit, that's nonprofit. How can we be a part of creating a movement that says that every available person and every single resource that's there, we're going to use all of it to go rescue every man, woman, boy, and girl that's lost and forgotten. We looked at a database recently, and the stats, these are going to be conservative estimates, but there's about 89,000 kids that are unknown.
Wow.
We have their names, we have their faces. I'm sorry, we have just their faces, but don't have their names. And because of that, they're unknown. And so what we're trying to do is leverage all the three-letter agencies, even all the governments around the world, and leveraging technology to figure out, can we actually match a face to a name? Some of these kids have been lost for 10 years, 15 years. But can we actually do the work to identify them so they can be restored, so they can be rescued? There's been examples of looking at Instagram photos because it was matched to a baby photo.
Wow.
Right? Using technology that can understand that if this girl grew up, what would she look like? And then matching it to a geolocation and an Instagram photo and saying, yep, that was the girl. Right? So there's powerful tools that are out there. But a lot of governments around the world don't fund this area really well. Recently we were a part of something called the Renewed Hope Act, which just passed Congress. One of the problems that we've seen in this country, we did a 6-month look back, and there's about 330,000 unique IP addresses that are downloading or sharing the rape of young children in this country. 330,000 unique IP addresses. And what we know about these offenders is that they're repeat offenders, and throughout their lifetime, on average, they'll have probably about 13 victims. Okay? Now, the government, across those 330,000 IP addresses across the country, only had 7 resources available to try and find who these perpetrators are. Extremely under-resourced. So what this bill did was, we had an ability to actually have 200 investigators around the country. It's a start. It's not good enough, but it's a start, and we're thankful for it.
It's more.
But on top of that, with the advancements of AI and technology, how can we actually leverage that alongside these investigators to actually drive this change exponentially, to go not just rescue, but also identify predators as well? So those are just some of the staggering numbers in the fight that we're facing. And we believe that the church can actually be the greatest movement in this fight. I think part of it is education. There's a lot of terminology that gets thrown out there. I just did it myself. What is trafficking? What is exploitation? I think 1, there's an education that needs to happen. 2, there's a realization of what's happening in your backyard.
And the problem.
And then what is the actual problem? Not being scared to talk about it because the language is too harsh. Oftentimes we've heard that, like, oh, I don't know if I want to hear that. It makes me think about my kids. And our reaction to that is, what would you say if one of those boys or girls that's in their darkest hour of need right now could hear you scared to learn about their situation? What kind of hope would they have? Right? So I think talking about it openly, educating, identifying the problems so that we can mobilize the church is going to be one of the greatest impacts we believe in this fight.
Is that why obviously you're doing work with the Tim Tebow Foundation, but the charity that comes out of, or the surplus, if you want to call it that comes out of your investments and the companies that you work with, that's the relationship that you have with Tim Tebow, right? It's to be able to fund some of these issues.
Yeah, what's so great about this is, again, we have a principled stance on faith-driven founders, with the venture fund. One, because we just see the rise of exponential innovation, and we need to have people of faith at the forefront of that, just like our heritage used to have. Because if not, we could get into a dangerous place with technology very fast. So that's one thing. But the second thing too is we really see the marketplace as just a fertile ground for mission. And what we decided to do early on is to say, what if we could not just invest in the most gifted founders that we believe that the church has, but then also to take the capital returns that come from these investments and then use them for the foundation in the fight against trafficking and exploitation. And so the way that I like to describe it is like God's clearly gifted us in the marketplace, right? Those are our gifts and talents. But what has God actually moved our heart for? And for me and Tim, what he's moved our heart for is to actually go serve the most vulnerable people around the world. And so, you know, we don't want to negate anybody from this fight, right? If somebody says, I'm a business owner, how can I be in the fight for trafficking? Here's a very clear example of it. You know, if you're maybe not interested in giving to a nonprofit, great, leverage your business. Because of that business, you have influence in the places that God has given you. Be that influence, be that voice for us. You know, if you want to give to the nonprofit, if you want to give to the foundation, awesome. But there's other strategic ways that we can leverage where I think that God would be pleased either way, right? I think all of these things are forms of worship because we know that we care for the children that God has placed on this earth. So let's just leverage all of it. And the other thing too is make sure that people don't feel like they have to be left out of this fight because maybe there's something that I don't know about it, right? So we really try to educate in that way too, to make sure that people feel that they can be loved, they can be brought in a unique way, and that everybody has a talent that can serve in this fight.
An all hands on deck approach.
All hands on deck.
To solving the big problems. Thank you so much, Joel.
You're welcome.